Hello everybody, welcome back to the Black Knight Off-Road channel. It's been a minute since we got to you with our Cape Cruisin series. This time we're in the Carnarvon Gorge area and I can't wait to show you some of the fascinating things in this region. There's a number of elements to the Carnarvon Gorge area which make it so alluring, and it sees up to 70,000 visitors a year. Firstly, you've got the Carnarvon Gorge section itself, which has some of the finest examples of Aboriginal rock art in the world. The Carnarvon Gorge area that most people know with the rock art is the focal point of most of the visitors' attention. But the Carnarvon Gorge area covers a great expanse of territory in this region. We're located in the Mount Moffat section, which is only about 15 kilometres as the crow flies from the gorge itself, but it's a 300-kilometre drive to get there. The Mount Moffat section that we're currently located in is famous for a couple of reasons. Firstly, you have some fine examples of what we call rock sculpture, which has been formed through the erosion of sandstone around, leaving the harder rock. And we've got Marlong Arch to look forward to and a couple of other things this afternoon as well. As I was researching the Mount Moffat area, I came across a story of the Kenniff Brothers. This is a grisly story of bushranging in this area which rivals Ned Kelly's in the south. Can't wait to tell you about that one. The Carnarvon Gorge region really is broken up into sort of an eastern and a western section. Now the western section was explored more by Sir Thomas Mitchell and the eastern section Ludwig Leichhardt. Now we're going to explore both of those regions together. As I say, the western section is Mount Moffat where we are, but also Salvator Rosa, which I'll come to later. But after we've finished exploring this area, we're going to head around and park up in the gorge area itself. Then we're going to attempt that full day's hike. Hopefully it's not too hot. The colonial and indigenous history of this area is also very interesting and somewhat dark, as you might imagine. Certainly when Ludwig Leichhardt and Thomas Mitchell came through this area, they went back to the cities and told everyone about the massive resources in this area. This area produces its own climate because it is quite elevated and it sees a lot of rain every year. You've also got artesian springs in this area. So the Aboriginal people knew this was very important from a water supply perspective, but also it held cultural and spiritual significance for them as well. So when the settlers came back into this area, you can imagine this was an area for the Aboriginal people well worth fighting for, and fight they did. One of the most interesting facts I came across when researching this area is that it contributes to essential components of Australia's river systems. To the west, we have the Kookaburra Creek into Lake Eyre tributaries. To the east, we have the Fitzroy River, which heads out to the sea near Rockhampton. And to the south, water from here forms the Murray-Darling. They are massive river systems in Australia. So you can see how geologically this area is so significant to Australia. I'm so grateful I get the opportunity to bring to you these fascinating places. At Black Knight Off-Road, we're really passionate about adventuring through these areas and giving you guys a different style of approach. Sure, we've got the vehicles which are flashing great to see through this countryside, but we hope you learn something from our videos as well. And thank you so much for subscribing and following and liking. Day one of our journey to Carnarvon National Park was a big day in the saddle. Departing from the Sunshine Coast, it's around an 8 to 9 hour drive northwest to the first campground in the Mount Moffat section. By the time we arrived, we were all pretty shagged, and as we pulled into Dargonelly Campground, we were left speechless by the absolute delight that this rest stop is. With freshly mowed lawns, a beautiful creek nearby, and a none too shabby drop loo, we were all stoked to call Dargonelly Campground home for the night. On waking on our first morning, we were all pretty rusty from the big drive from yesterday, so we decided to have a slow start and see the surrounding natural beauty of this campground, and also have a few coffees, a few yarns, and generally just chill out before we were due to push further north into the Mount Moffat section come mid-morning. You might notice that there's been a few changes to the Black Knight and the Torpedo since our Cape Cruisin trip. Firstly, you'll see on the roof of the Torpedo that we're now using the famous Pelican cases. renowned for their ability to keep dust and water out, which is obviously great considering we're carrying lots of expensive camera equipment. I'm also partial to throwing a few clothes up top too, which, as you might imagine, is always preferable to be dry and dust-free. We were all a little sad to leave the serenity of Dargonelly Campground, but that was a brief sensation as the excitement of imminent exploration and adventure took over. So we eagerly made our way further north into the fascinating heartland of the Mount Moffat section of Carnarvon National Park. On the black night, you'll see the new addition of 4 Baja designed spotlights on the front bull bar. The outer 2 are in amber and the inner 2 clear. For those of you who know their off-road lights, you'll know that Baja designs, with their roots in off-road racing, are the best in the world. And, in my opinion, the best looking off-road light in the world too. There's lots more to come from Baja designs for the Black Knight, so be sure to keep up with all developments on our Instagram page. So we've just left the campsite there at Mount Moffat and we're heading north into the heart of the Mount Moffat section of Carnarvon Gorge. We're on this sandy sort of trail here, and this section here of the park and the entire park in general has a lot of sandstone in it. Effectively, the Carnarvon Gorge itself was carved out through millions of years of the course of the water running through the area that were coming both from the rain that was falling and also the artesian springs in the area that were carving that sandstone out, making a course to those rivers I mentioned earlier. Major Thomas Mitchell was an integral character in Australia's early exploration. He had a couple of expeditions that were very famous, and one of them was his trip up through here to the Carnarvon Gorge region. He was a little disappointed that Ludwig Leichhardt beat him to it, but Ludwig did that eastern section of the park, whereas Mitchell did this western section. One of the perks of being an early explorer of Australia, such as Mitchell and Leichhardt, is you get the odd thing named after you. One of the things that Major Mitchell had named after him was this grass here, called Mitchell grass now. It's abundant in this area, you'll see it everywhere. Of course, you might also know about the Major Mitchell cockatoo with his pink crest. As you head north into the Mount Moffat section of Carnarvon National Park, the first site that you'll come to worth seeing is Marlong Arch. Marlong Arch has been made through years of weathered sandstone, and it's formed this precipice arch that's really interesting. Marlong Arch, what a fine example of how nature can shape things into the most beautiful natural sculpture. So if you're up this way, definitely call into Marlong Arch, and if this is a sign of things to come in Carnarvon National Park, I can't wait to see the rest. I thought it was what? Oh, fuck. Fucking that can't touch you. Fuck.
Too busy looking at your feet, aren't you?
Well, fuck. You sort of watch where you go. You don't expect to get necked. So a little further on down the track from Marlong Arch, you'll come across the turnoff to Kookaburra Cave, which is adorned with rich ochre stencils from the Aboriginal times here. It's famous in this area, so we're going to go down and check it out now. We're currently here at the Kookaburra Cave viewing platform. This little area here, and we look forward into the rock face here, and we can see a number of Aboriginal artworks along this rock face here. Now, the method by which the Aboriginal people got these pictures up here was they sort of painted with negative space using a mixture of ochre and water and spit. They put it in their mouth, they put their hand up against the rock and they sprayed it out, and what was left was obviously the picture of their hand painted with that negative space. And they've done one here with whatever method to create that stencil of the Kookaburra. So that's really interesting. Probably dating around 5,000 years old. To get a real appreciation of the geological significance of this area, I need to tell you a little bit about the history. So basically, around 190 million years ago, The creeks and river systems in this area deposited large amounts of sand. And you still see evidence of that sand here today with the sand on the tracks and also the sandstone that we see through the gorge. But about 60 to 90 million years ago, that sandstone shelf began to rise as Australia moved over some unstable areas in the Earth's crust. But it wasn't until 25 million years ago that things got really interesting. The Buckland volcano erupted and it spewed basalt lava right across this area. So then you had a combination of the sandstone and the basalt lava or rock, and that formed layers which were then eroded with more water, rain and water from the artesian system, and they created the river catchments that we see today that supply the Fitzroy River, the Murray-Darling, little rock here, and also Cooper Creek into Lake Eyre heading west. The next stop on the track in Mount Moffat is Lot's Wife, which is a remarkable example of precipice sandstone that has been eroded and left here as this amazing pillar. It's a remnant of a bluff that extended right through this area. Fantastic. Lots of orb spiders on these tracks. See them everywhere. That's why we're ducking. Lot's Wife is so random in its morphology, seemingly placed there by Zeus himself. But it really is just one piece of an epic geological puzzle left behind from an ancient landscape. It's simply fascinating. I'd love to know the story behind the name Lot's Wife, so if any one of you know, be sure to leave a comment below, and amusing wrong answers are also encouraged. So we left Lot's Wife mainly because she didn't provide us any tea and scones, and we pushed further north. Check out those two Pelican cases on the roof of the Torpedo. I was initially worried they wouldn't fit, but I'm so pleased they do. They nearly appear custom made for the big Troopy. I absolutely love it when a vehicle build really comes together. The Mount Moffat track between Marlong Arch to the Incineration Site isn't a long drive, and all the attractions along here are reasonably closely spaced, which is super convenient as we could tick them all off in a half day's travel. If you're a four-wheel driving enthusiast, I'm sure you've been asked the age-old question, beach or bush? Personally, when I reach destinations like Carnarvon National Park, with its lush, pseudo-prehistoric landscape, it's bush all the way for me. I mean, take a look around. It's just epic and such a privilege and pleasure to drive through. As you can see, the off-roading difficulty through this region is relatively easy, but because of the abundance of sandstone, there's still a fair amount of bull dust flying around. And normally we wouldn't drive this close so as not to suck dust into the engine. But for the purposes of framing shots for filming, it's a brief requirement. Check out those Baja Designs LP9 Spotties on the Black Knight. They just look so epic and really add a mean appearance to the front end. I can't wait to fit the rest of these lights in the coming weeks. It's gonna look unreal. As we drive to the incineration site, you have to go on what's known as the High Country Drive Circuit. That takes you to the top of what's known as the Consuelo Tablelands, which should give us a lovely view of the surrounding area. This part of the Carnarvon National Park is known as the Roof of Queensland, and it sits at about between 1,000 and 1,200 metres in altitude, which by world standards is not very high, but Australian standards, it's getting up there. And for Queensland, it's one of the highest peaks there is. An odd quirk in the attitude of colonial Australians was the general support they afforded to certain bushrangers. Ned Kelly, our most famous bushranger, and also Queensland's Kenniff Brothers, were, on one hand, murdering thieves. However, colonial Australians also saw them as hard done by, and somewhat forced into their violent deeds by an oppressive government and police force, which is perhaps why they didn't mind when the odd bushranger fought back against the system. Queensland doesn't have too many famous outlaws, but the Kenniff Brothers definitely are. We call them Bushrangers in Australia, and we're currently on a drive here to the Incineration Site. Might sound like somewhere where you burn your rubbish. No, it has a much more grisly history than that. In the early to mid 20th century, where world wars also shaped our nation's general attitude, mateship was the buzzword of the era, and there seemed to be general support for political agenda in these years. Since the 1960s, however, with the failed Vietnam War, the illegal invasion in Iraq based on weapons of mass destruction lies, the failed Afghan debacle, and more recently the COVID fiasco, Australians are again entering into a period of complete distrust of government, who are seemingly hell-bent on steering us towards a hyper-woke Orwellian society, while the rest of us, silent majority, are opening our eyes to the agenda of big war, big pharma, and the deep state. Thus, if a modern-day Kelly or Kenniff inspired a revolt against this current polarising system of control, I could envisage the silent majority of Australians supporting it, which is also why censorship and cancelling and freedom of speech are such hot topics right now, obviously in an attempt to further control and prevent this sort of social revolt. But hey, I digress, and I'll save my opinions for the campfire. So far this track has been very easy in terms of four-wheel driving. We've come across our little, first little mud patch here, little bog hole. It doesn't look deep, but there's plenty of winching options, so we're not worried. We've got two vehicles, so it's all good. Check out the Maxxis Trepadors just eating up this mud. I cop a raised eyebrow from time to time from folks who believe these tyres are unsuitable for the driving I do. But my attitude and response is always this: I build my vehicles to be suitable for the worst terrain I expect to encounter, not the best, and it's served me well. Wow, this landscape is simply incredible. The ferns you see here are ubiquitous in this region and give this drive those Jurassic Park vibes. We absolutely loved it. After a minor obstacle, we head northward towards the infamous Incineration Site. But just take in this stunning countryside for a moment. What an absolute treat to experience. The story of the Kenniff Brothers comes to this point right here, the Incineration Site. This is where they deposed to the bodies of Albert Dalka and Constable George Doyle. The Kenniff Brothers were James and Paddy Kenniff from Ireland, came out here in the mid-1800s. They came up to this region here in the 1890s and they started stealing horses and cattle. They ended up in jail for a few years, and this Albert Dalka, he had a thing for these guys and he decided that their land lease should be sold up. So when they got out of jail, they had no way of making any money. So what did they do? They went back to stealing cattle and horses. Then they came on the radar of the police again, and one day a black tracker, Sammy Johnson, Albert Dalka and George Doyle came after them. They came across the boys out here somewhere. They had no handcuffs on them. They sent Sammy Johnson back to the pack horses to get some handcuffs. While he was there, he heard shots. He came back and he saw that there was a scuffle breaking out. What happened, we don't really know. But what we think is that brothers of those two came to their aid and they murdered these chaps on the spot. Believing he was being pursued by the Kenniff Brothers, Sammy Johnson went back to Mitchell and he raised the alarm. They sent out a lot of policemen to this area searching for the two Kenniff brothers. What they found was a grisly sight. They came across the horses of Albert Dalka and they saw stuffed inside the saddlebags were the earthly remains of their bodies, charred in this case. After discovering the grisly remains, the search continued for the two brothers, and they did find them in Lethbridge Pocket, where a scuffle broke out after they shot the horses of these two guys and took them back in. They were eventually tried in Boggo Road Jail. At the time, the political sentiment against the government wasn't positive, or the public sentiment I should say, and these guys had a lot of public support at their trial and also at the appeal. So they were kind of like seen in a high light by the average Joe. At the trial, it was deemed that Paddy was instrumental in the murders. James, not so much. He did time in prison at Boggo Road, whereas Paddy, he saw the hangman's noose. I didn't know a lot about the story of the Kenniff brothers until I started researching the Carnarvon Gorge area, but I'm so glad I did. It's really enriched my experience on this trip, and it's a very interesting story in Australia's colonial history.
I'm not going to lie, we all felt a little weird to be enjoying ourselves at such a beautiful place with its disturbing history. Let's have a chat to Henry and Sam and see what their thoughts are on this region.
So we've just had a lovely swim here at the Incineration Site. I know that might sound a little bit odd, but to my right here I have Henry, to my left I have Sam. Again, on these Cruisin' series videos, I need to bring a couple of volunteer drivers. Henry, what are your previous notions about Carnarvon Gorge? Did you know much about it before you came?
Mate, I didn't. This is very much a first for me in many respects, but I'm glad I'm here.
Have you had any off-road experience before?
No, not like this. I grew up obviously in Dubai, which you know about. We did a lot of desert stuff.
Nice.
But no, nothing like this.
Excellent. Sam, it's you again. Well, welcome back, mate. Carnarvon Gorge, you have been here before. How is today compared to your previous visit?
Well, I don't think we actually did this side. I think we took the easy route in around the other side. But yeah, from what I can remember, it was awesome. So looking forward to having a bit more of a look this time around.
Yeah, right. A lot of people say they come to Carnarvon Gorge and really they see the gorge itself, which is what we're doing tomorrow. They don't really do this Mount Moffat section, but for anyone who's interested, I really encourage you to come up and see this Mount Moffat section if you've got the time. It really feels like Jurassic Park as you're going through here, nearly prehistoric. It's an incredible place, and with the colonial history and the indigenous history and of course the story of the Kenniff brothers, I think it's a must-do on anyone's trip to the Carnarvon Gorge area. So that wraps up our Mount Moffat section on the Carnarvon National Park. We did want to see the top of the Consuelo Tablelands for that nice view, but we looked over here and they've closed the gate. So we're going to pack up our stuff and send it back around to Carnarvon Gorge for a long hike. So last night we stayed at a place called In June, which is down the road from In July. Just kidding. It's about 150 k's south of here, and we had a nice dinner, a rest and relaxation there. We've made our way up here to the main attraction of the Carnarvon National Park, which is this Carnarvon Gorge Walk. It's a reasonably long walk at 20 kilometres return, but well worth the effort, we're told. On this trip or on this walk, you're going to see that amazing Aboriginal rock art that we've been talking about, which dates back to 6,000 years old. And of course, we'll get a sense of the Aboriginal Dreamtime folklore of the rainbow serpent carving out this gorge through this sandstone. So I really hope to get a sense of that indigenous history here today.
At 20 kilometres plus, the Carnarvon Great Walk might seem easy on paper, but don't be fooled. With so many attractions and the mercury nudging 35 degrees, we decided to manage our effort and focus on the attractions that we felt were most significant. After a brief chat with the lads, we decided to make a beeline for the art gallery, the most famous site of indigenous rock art on this walk. That meant scaling back and skipping a few other sites, such as Belinda Bluff, which is a 2-hour sidewalk off the track with very steep gradients. There wasn't any resistance among us to skip that one in this heat.
The undeclared war between the colonial settlers and the aboriginal peoples of this land was waged over a period of around 20 years. Now we've only come in here about 5 kilometres and we're just struck, firstly by the beauty of this region and this gorge, but also by the abundance of water and life through here. This was a war of resources, and the Aboriginals definitely didn't want to just hand it over and walk away. Certainly they didn't have the guns of the Europeans, but they used their tactics in a guerrilla-style warfare over that period of around 20 years, and they inflicted some heavy casualties on the colonials. Something about that made me feel better about that history, knowing that they did have the capacity and they chose to fight for what they wanted and believed in.
Seeing as though we were as fresh as we were ever going to be on this beautiful sunny day, we cracked the whip and got stuck into reaching our most distant attraction and turnaround point, the art gallery. After reaching the art gallery, we'd stop off at our other chosen favourites, which included the incredible amphitheatre and the stunning moss garden. This would be around a 15-kilometre hike, as we wouldn't go all the way to the end, which is known as Big Bend, which really was a bridge too far for us on this sweltering day. Doing it this way also gave us a great introduction to the lay of the land in the gorge, and we noted the signpost to our other attractions we'd see on the way back, which would ultimately save us a little time. While we hiked along this 20-kilometre trail, I couldn't help but ponder the efforts of Ludwig Leichhardt on his first expedition in 1844 from Moreton Bay to Port Essington, which lies about 300 kilometres north of Darwin, a distance of over 4,500 kilometres or 3,000 miles. He passed not too far to the east of Carnarvon Gorge and had long been given up for dead when he arrived over a year later in Port Essington. What an amazing achievement, and what an incredible time to be alive and up for adventure.
So we've just arrived here at the art gallery. This is the most sacred area of the Carnarvon National Park for the indigenous people. This sheer sandstone wall is adorned with Aboriginal rock art motifs carrying huge symbolism and purpose, and it's the written language for the people. Some of the many motifs that you can see here on the wall are typical objects such as boomerangs, and of course that famous hand with the ochre stenciled around it. Here we have some fishing nets also, which is a symbolism of a burial site for the Aboriginal people. Moving down the wall here, we have some really interesting rock carvings. The female vulva here, there's hundreds of them on the wall. This is a very sacred place, and it was obviously a symbolism of fertility, and they used to have ceremonies in this area, perhaps to pray for fertility. Much of the artwork that you see on the wall here dates to over 5,000 years ago, and Aboriginals in this area have been known to inhabit the region for over 20,000 years. So you can imagine how they felt when they were encroached upon by white settlers, and that they put up a fight was a reflection of their belief and conviction that they had to belong in this area, and also fight for the sacred ground that they thought this was, that they believed this was. The art gallery that you see here is certainly one of the main features on the Great Walk of the Carnarvon Gorge. There are a couple further back towards the visitor centre that we're going to see now, such as the amphitheatre and moss garden. So let's check those out now.
We'd already noted where the turn-off was to the amphitheatre on our way out to the art gallery, so all we had to do now was retrace our steps. One thing is for certain, we were all very satisfied to be past the halfway point on this walk, which we all agreed would have been much easier in cooler conditions.
Nature has really shaped this whole area into some of the most beautiful natural formations you'll see anywhere in the world. I mean, this rivals anything I've ever seen anywhere.
Have a look at this place. Even Shakespeare would struggle to pen a phrase to capture the beauty of this very special place. Absolutely sublime.
Wow. That's incredible.
Imagine being the first person to discover this. I mean, we walked up some man-made steps and through this towering crevice, and even we were left speechless by the reward for our efforts. What I wouldn't give to see the expression on the face of the first human who saw it. Probably no different from our own.
Here we are at the incredible amphitheatre. It's just this stunning sheer faces of rock in every direction, and my voice sounds remarkably good in here. I want to have a chat to the lads about their thoughts on this being such a spiritual and significant place for not only the Aboriginal people, but I think anybody who came across such a, an amazing place as this would have to hit some part of you and inspire some awe inside you. Henry, what are your thoughts on the amphitheatre and also what you've seen today?
I think it makes you feel really small, and I think anything that can make you feel really small makes you ask the big questions. And nature certainly has a good way, a clever way of doing that. You come up these stairs and through this crack, and you step into this space, and it really just makes you sort of stop and think. Makes you, super present.
Yeah, it's like a portal to presence, really, isn't it?
Yeah, because you're here, and it's breathtaking.
Yeah, absolutely. Good thoughts. Sam,
Yeah.
did you come here before?
No, we didn't come up in this far, but kind of disappointed we didn't after seeing it now.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect, coming down there. It was beautiful enough as it is back there, and then we come up through the crevice there and into this space. It's unreal.
Yeah. It's a humbling atmosphere, this one, and as Henry said, anything that can bring that level of humility to you, and yes, we're insignificant, but we are part of this as well, and I think anything that makes you feel part of nature can only be a good thing.
So it was with some reluctance that we moved on from the breathtaking amphitheatre. But with fading light becoming a factor and Moss Garden yet to be seen, we needed to crack on. But rest assured, we'll be singing the praises of the amphitheatre for many years to come. After around 20 to 30 minutes of hiking, we made our way into the side gorge known as Violet Gorge, which has a very peculiar geology that ultimately created the most visited natural feature on the Carnarvon Great Walk, Moss Garden. The lush oasis of Moss Garden was created from water percolating within the towering sandstone gorge walls to a point where its path is blocked by impervious shale rock, forcing it to perspire outwards to the face of the shale, which created an environment where mosses, liverworts and ferns carpet the surface of the shale. Moss Garden is a veritable Garden of Eden. Mosses cling like bright green velvet tapestry above a rock pool fed by trickling waterfalls. The entire scene is tranquil, lovely and idyllic, and we could have literally spent hours there, sitting with the sounds and life of the stunning natural world playing out a siren's melody around us.
So this marks the end of a fantastic journey into the Great Walk of Carnarvon Gorge. So many spectacular sights we've seen today. And if you ever get the chance to get up this way, you must do this walk and you must see these sights. It just really adds to this cultural experience that this beautiful land has to offer. So yesterday we did the Great Walk through the Carnarvon Gorge, which was totally beautiful. We were pretty tired after that, so we had to swim in the rock pool there, and then we decided to stay at the Big 4 Caravan Park. Now we were charged $84 for an unpowered site and 4 people. And that always hurts me when I've got a vehicle that can basically stay off grid anywhere. Anyway, that's just me. We're about 10 k's west of Salvator Rosa, and this area of the Carnarvon region was first explored in a European sense by Thomas Mitchell. After realising that Ludwig Leichhardt had done the eastern section, he took it upon himself to check out the western section. And he named the Salvator Rosa region after the Italian artist, because his works inspired thoughts of this region here. Little known fact about Thomas Mitchell is he's quite the artist himself. Before he came out to Australia, his job was a battlefield sketcher in the army, and he did some time in Portugal, and his job was to sketch the battlefield scenes. That's a little interesting fact about Thomas Mitchell.
The Salvator Rosa section of the Carnarvon National Park lies northwest of the Carnarvon Gorge region that we explored yesterday. Rather like the Mount Moffat section, this region was also somewhat enigmatic for us, and prior to researching the area, I knew very little about its fascinating geological history and its connection to Major Thomas Mitchell. Named by Mitchell in 1846, Salvator Rosa is at the western edge of the Central Queensland sandstone belt and is characterised by coarse-grained sandstones that are very crumbly. Erosion of this sandstone has left behind many interesting features that dominate the skyline in this region, including Spyglass Peak and the Sentinel, which we're on our way to see now. Salvator Rosa is also hugely significant for its contribution to the Great Australian river systems mentioned earlier. Crystal clear springs add more than 10 million litres of water a day to the peaceful Louisa Creek and the Nagoa River as they meander beneath a backdrop of rocky sandstone crags and spires. Suffice to say, we were all super curious to check out these fascinating sites, and in doing so, tick off the final region of our Carnarvon National Park adventure.
The yard site. Yard site's further down at the end of the track. The Salvator Rosa section of Carnarvon National Park really is synonymous with Sir Thomas Mitchell, who explored this area as he attempted to make Port Essington and establish an overland route from Sydney to Port Essington. When I was younger, I'd heard names like Ludwig Leichhardt and Thomas Mitchell, and they really didn't mean anything at all to me. But since I've been into this four-wheel drive caper and overlanding caper, it's really given me great perspective and a deep appreciation for what these men did in the 1840s with minimal provisions, nothing like what we have today. And these guys took years to complete these journeys through great hardship, and there was danger from interactions with the indigenous people in these areas. So I have a great deal of respect and a deeper knowledge and appreciation for what they've achieved.
If you're looking for some hardcore off-roading, then I would suggest you look elsewhere. Other than the odd puddle like this, there really is nothing too challenging in this region. If on the other hand you're interested in captivating geological history and peculiar natural rock formations, then Salvator Rosa is definitely the place for you. Like elsewhere in the Carnarvon National Park, the drive through Salvator Rosa is just a lovely experience. The landscape is always pleasing to the eye, and the drive itself is relaxed, easygoing and very enjoyable. According to our maps, we expected to come across the huge sandstone monolith of Spyglass Peak as our first point of attraction, and we were all keen to take the walk around the base and also send the drone up to get some close-up footage of the spyglass. Let's just say that didn't go quite to plan, but I'll come back to that in a moment.
Right, so we just pulled up here to Spyglass Peak, probably an hour and a half ago at this point, and our drone pilot slash videographer thought he'd cut a lap and get some fantastic shots for you all to watch. Then he realized the drone cut because it didn't get any radio signal, and yeah, all hell broke loose. Sam, would you like to tell us a little bit more about what happened from that point on?
Well, we did some serious rock climbing. Yeah, yeah, I guess you'll see on the footage, but it was pretty hectic getting up there. It was good though, Henry was there. Bit of moral support, watching where my feet were going, so it's all good.
Would you call it an easy climb up to Spyglass Peak?
No, it was pretty hectic there. Yeah, last 10 metres was.
Last 10 metres, what was that like?
It was pretty vertical, but plenty of boot and footholds, so it was all good.
Do you need some baby wipes for you know what?
Nah, it's all good.
We've got time, mate. I'm happy to, sling you a spare pair of jocks or something, whatever you need.
Nah, we came out all right. Yeah.
Excellent. Henry, you climbed up there as well, mate. Any thoughts on that area? What could you see in the distance from that height?
You can see pretty far, but you could see the wall, the rock wall, which is 4 or 5 metres high, and it just ran for as far as you could see.
Yeah. There was other signs that people had climbed up there. What signs did you see?
There was a few, just a few names being carved on the sandstone up there, but I don't think many people have been up there, to be honest. I think you'd get to that last little bit and go, yeah, nah, I'm coming back down.
What do you think our videographers should get? Drone for a drone?
Drone for a drone.
I think that's pretty fair. What do you reckon, Dan? It's happening, he says. It's in the post.
While all this was going on, a couple of Jackaroos rolled up in a maroon 79 series Land Cruiser. One thing I've noticed over the years in my travels into outback Australia is how friendly the locals are. These two legends were up for a yarn, offered us a beer, and had a good old chuckle at our recent misadventure. They also gave us a little tip about a quote-unquote interesting cave that we might like to check out. We were totally up for exploring a little local knowledge, so off we went.
So we came here to look at a cave, and on the suggestion of a couple of Jackaroos at the local station there. The cave I'm not sure about, but the view's pretty good. Anyway, it's all part of the adventure, right? That and spiders. Yeah, right, you could have a good night's sleep in there. It goes right down in there. Oh, kinda. I'll let you be the judge. What do you reckon, Henry?
Yeah, no, I'm disappointed if that's it.
Yeah? Have we seen enough? Alright, let's go back to the Nagoa River campsite. I don't know about you boys, but after drone retrieval, not that I did a lot, and cave hunting and driving, I'm thirsty.
There are so many reasons why I love the off-road life, but one that has become more apparent to me since doing these YouTube videos is hanging out with other exceptional men. I believe the off-road experience, with the adventure and challenges it presents and the problem solving required, is quintessentially the conditions men need to bond with each other. At a certain point in life, many men can become isolated in their community and disconnected from their brothers. They might no longer play competitive sport and are neck deep in the grind of raising kids, paying the mortgage and supporting their partner, and generally doing their best to be a high-value man. Men are strong, but societal expectations of men are immense and onerous. Needless to say, men's mental health suffers from this pressure, and if men suffer, we all suffer. The illusion is that a good woman can save a man, but she can't. What he needs is his brothers, other good men that he can feel supported by. Men do this differently to women. We hunt together, we explore together, we joke around and connect as we overcome challenges together, and we speak freely without fear of judgment when we stare at a campfire after a long day in the saddle. I don't do these YouTube trips for fame. I do them to connect with other exceptional men whose support and presence inspires me to go back into society feeling stronger and more mentally rejuvenated. I'll always do these trips, YouTube or not. A trend I've noticed over time is that it usually takes me a couple of days to settle into the groove of overlanding and exploring, leaving the worries and stress of my urban life behind. On this beautiful morning, I really felt those vibes. I mean, there really is nothing better than immersing oneself in the stunning natural world around us. It becomes a reminder to me that we are not separate from nature, we are nature. So this morning, we decided to just chill for a bit and have a relaxed breakfast, check our camera gear and have a few brews, while Dan, our videographer, sent up his FPV drone. This thing is incredible to watch and buzzes around at high speeds with the maneuverability of a dragonfly, all while Dan controls it through his virtual reality goggles. If you're into video games, I reckon FPV drones might be your cup of tea. We were all looking forward to seeing the artesian springs that we missed yesterday due to our drone misadventure. And to do so, we needed to retrace our steps back past the Spyglass Peak and further west into the depths of the Salvator Rosa. Since we've started using Pelican cases, we can now travel much easier knowing that all our camera gear can remain safe and sound, no matter what elements they're exposed to. Crucial to their convenience is the fact that we can pack our gear away quickly and easily and also identify what we need to at the drop of a hat, which helps to reduce the chances of leaving expensive gear behind. We haul these cases in and out of the vehicles multiple times a day, and if it weren't for their robust design, they wouldn't last 5 minutes out here, and neither would our camera gear. We had to double back over some of the same tracks as yesterday, but it was much nicer weather, so it was great to see this beautiful country in better light conditions. It's so stunning out here and quite clear that the Salvator Rosa is a very seldom seen region in the Carnarvon National Park compared to the Gorge itself. As mentioned before, driving through Salvator Rosa is a piece of cake. But one thing to consider is that you are well and truly out of mobile reception, and your ability to get help out here is still very limited. So I'd always advise you pack a GME EPIRB so you don't have to trek out of here on your own 2 feet if the proverbial hit the fan. That would not be a fun time.
I've already mentioned so far that the Carnarvon region is very important to Australia's major river systems. That rainfall and the water that comes from this area, well, as I said, just comes from rainfall predominantly. It creates its own weather pattern due to its elevation. But one of the major contributors to those river systems is the artesian springs in this region. They contribute upwards of 10 million litres of water a day to those river systems. And they predominantly come out of the Salvator Rosa section of the National Park, which is where we are now, and we're going to take a look at them soon. After around 30 minutes of driving from our campsite, we came across the signpost to Louisa Creek, one of the major expressions of the Great Artesian Basin. At first sight, there was no sign of a creek, a watercourse, or anything that looked even remotely like it. The apparent path to the creek was completely overgrown by waist-high grasses, and we all had a little trepidation about walking through this area, as where there's long grass and water, there's often wildlife, the kind that has no legs. After about a 100-metre walk or so, we spotted the stunning crystal clear waters of Louisa Creek, and we were instantly pleased that we overcame our reptilian fears to explore this magical place. So here we are at Louisa Creek. This creek is formed from Belinda Springs, the artesian spring, just a little bit further on down there. This water through here is super cool, tastes great. Fantastic, supporting life not only in the Carnarvon area, but greater regions in Australia and beyond, which I think is absolutely fascinating when you think about it.
The Louisa Creek area is a veritable oasis in this region, and with the temperature nudging the low 30s, it provided us with a great opportunity to cool down. The pristine waters of Louisa Creek are the perfect antidote to refreshing one's physical and mental state. And Henry, a big believer in the healing properties of natural water sources, was delighted to take full advantage of this very special place to do just that. Suffice to say, we all thoroughly enjoyed spending some quality time in this beautiful location. It was such a treat.
Louisa Creek, what an amazing place. When you get to the car park up here, there's lots of reeds that are quite high and you won't be able to see Louisa Creek from the car park, and it's not a very nice walk down, and we were nearly considering pulling the pin, but gee, we really would have missed out if we didn't come down and see this. So if you get here, make sure you come and see it.
The main source of water that feeds Louisa Creek comes from Belinda Springs. And as we walked over to the springs opening, I was expecting to see a torrent of water cascading from the ground somewhere. But it really is just a trickle as it softly murmurs through the rocks and ferns of the lower ground to feed Louisa Creek and beyond.
Have a look around here and how lush and green this is. And it's no surprise because Belinda Springs, where I'm standing, this is where it comes out underneath this rock, contributes to the 10 million litres of water a day that heads into those catchments I've mentioned. The other spring you've got is Major Mitchell Springs, where he camped while he was on the Nagoa River in his expedition up towards Port Essington. Unfortunately, the gate to access that springs is closed, but if it's anything like this, pretty special.
These drone shots really give a great indication of the lifeblood that water is for this region. As the water from Belinda Springs courses its way from beneath the rocks we're standing on, you can really see how green, healthy and densely packed the flora is along the course of the spring water. We were all in agreement that Salvator Rosa is a fascinating region in its own right, and paired with what we'd seen and explored already, the Carnarvon National Park really is a natural wonder that we believe is a must-see for anyone interested in the natural and colonial history of Australia.
So I'm sad to say this is where our Carnarvon National Park adventure comes to a close. When I reflect on all the amazing things that we've seen over the last few days, from the Kenniff Brothers story in Mount Moffat, through to the amazing Carnarvon Gorge National Park walk, into Salvator Rosa, there really is something for everyone here. Whether you're interested in the geological history of the area, the importance of the water that comes through this area, to the entire of Queensland and other parts of Australia, and through to the Aboriginal rock art formation, the indigenous history, the colonial history. There really is something for everyone here, and I think it's something all of you should do if you get the chance. Let's have a chat to the guys and see what their highlights were. Sam, the amazing driver, how are you, mate?
Good, mate. Very good.
Excellent. What was your highlight on this Carnarvon National Park adventure from all those things that I just mentioned that we've seen?
Yeah, I think the the Great Walks up into the Gorge was my favourite part, although it was 15 k's and not so partial to walking that far, but it was good, and I think what we saw was awesome. Won't be the last time.
Moss Garden, the art gallery, the amphitheatre. If you had to choose one, which would you choose?
I think Moss Garden had me. It was, yeah, just beautiful up in there. Really nice.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I'd probably choose the amphitheatre just because it was just so sheer and vast. You just can't create that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Nature is beautiful. Let's have a chat to Henry. Mate, thanks very much for coming along this trip. I really appreciate it. What's been your highlight, mate?
It was definitely Carnarvon Gorge, for sure. But outside of that, it's just been getting away and taking your shoes off and switching off and going on an adventure and not knowing where you're going to wake up, not knowing where you're going to stop.
Yeah.
And just getting outside of, the rat race and the story that we tell ourselves. And through the swimming, jumping in these water holes has been really cool. So I've enjoyed all of it.
Yeah, it's been not only to see these amazing features in this area, but just to connect with this beautiful part of the country, from the waterways to just sitting in nature. I mean, I'm sure all you guys out there agree with us that, this is why we get away, is to, disconnect from a high-pressured world that we live in and connect with ourselves and our loved ones through this amazing experience. So yeah, if you get the opportunity to come to Carnarvon National Park, please put it on your list. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow, leave a comment if you've got a question, and I promise I'll get back to you. Thanks very much for watching, guys. So that's a wrap on our Carnarvon Cruisin adventure. We hope you liked it, and we want to take this opportunity to thank you all for your support, without which we couldn't make these videos. Also, stay tuned for our next video, which will be coming out very soon, where we'll be exploring the World Heritage Site of Gari, formerly known as Fraser Island. Until then, get out there and keep exploring this beautiful world of ours.